Dimensions of Juvenile Delinquency, Chapter 2. Various sources of information may be consulted regarding the extent of juvenile delinquency in the United States. In 1930, a voluntary program for the collecting of crime statistics was initiated by both international and national organizations. In 1974, juvenile delinquency was identified as a critical national concern. In order for us to obtain the most valuable information about juvenile delinquency, we should be acquainted with these sources in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. The weaknesses should not prevent us from using these sources, but should make us more aware that our analysis of the problem of juvenile delinquency will not be perfect. Nevertheless, the various sources of information will provide valuable insights into the reality of the problem. The media tend to focus on youth crime in a very sensational way. In addition, young people have unprecedented access to social media technology and record and share their exploits with others. Much of what we read and hear on the news is selective reporting designed to get attention. The public is fascinated with nonconformity. However, despite the media portrayal, the vast majority of juvenile arrests are for non-violent crimes, and most youths are not delinquent. Still, delinquency and youth crime are significant social problems. Statistical data are collected in order to provide current insights into juvenile delinquency. It is important we analyze these data in a proper manner. The methods and procedures used to collect and analyze data determine their accuracy and usefulness. Your text advocates that two factors be considered when analyzing such data. Validity. A measure has validity when it measures whether it is supposed to measure and accurately reflects factual evidence. Factors such as random sampling, the survey design, the subjects, and others can affect the validity of a study. Reliability. A measure has reliability when it yields the same results upon repetition of the measuring procedure or replication by other investigators. In order to make a fair comparison of the findings from two studies, the conditions, methodology, and subjects must be as identical as possible. To be reliable, an instrument can be relied upon to produce similar results when used by different researchers. Validity and reliability clearly are related, and both are enhanced if survey questions are structured so that the subjects can readily understand them and elicit informative, straightforward answers. These principles are useful in evaluating data on juvenile delinquency. Status offenses. A large proportion of law violations committed by youth are status offenses, those offenses only applicable to juveniles. The widespread application of status offense laws prior to 1965 led to the incarceration of a huge number of children and youths. Since the 1960s, society has become more sensitive to juvenile rights. There is growing support for the idea that these offenses should be removed from the juvenile justice system. When juveniles go into the juvenile justice system, the state then acts as the parent. This is referred to as parens patriae. Male and female involvement in juvenile delinquency. Each year, the male juveniles are arrested, on average between 2 and 3 times more often than females. This difference is consistent across societies. The only exception to this arrest trend is female arrests for prostitution. One theory uses parental socialization to explain these gender differences in juvenile crime. Males are arrested 2 to 3 times more often than females, except for running away and prostitution. The racial and ethnic factors in juvenile delinquency. Racial group applies to those minorities and corresponding majorities that are classified according to obvious physical differences such as skin color, facial features, and hair texture. Arrest statistics also vary by ethnicity. Minority groups that are differentiated from the dominant group on the basis of cultural rather than physical differences. Each year, white youths are more likely than black youths to be arrested for property crimes. However, black youths account for a high proportion of arrests for violent crimes, most of which are perpetuated against other black individuals. Students interested in securing information about the extent of juvenile delinquency should consult two official federal sources of information concerning the matter. One is provided by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The other is provided by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. The Uniform Crime Reports, or the UCR, are very popular in terms of being used by researchers and the media when commenting on criminal activity. They provide important insights into the extent and types of changes in matters relating to criminal activities committed by juveniles. The first 8 UCR categories are murder, forcible rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. The last of these 4 are referred to as property crimes, directed against property. All 8 are referred to as index offenses. Since 1930, the FBI has been compiling arrest data on crime and delinquency from a network of local and state law enforcement agencies. Each year, the FBI summarizes data into the Uniform Crime Report. This report can be used to separate juvenile delinquency from adult crime. A major strength of the report is that it uses standardized definitions of the main kinds of crime that are used by all law enforcement agencies. Click on the link to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reports to look up the index crime rates for your state's largest cities. Click on the Juvenile Crime Trends link to be taken to the offenses for those under the age of 18. Juvenile arrest for specific offenses. The UCR considers a juvenile to be a person under the age of 18. Using UCR data, we can determine the percentage of violent and nonviolent crimes committed by juveniles. NIBRS, the National Incident-Based Reporting System, is a part of the UCR that provides more in-depth data on victims and offenders. For example, it provides date and time information, a list of offenses that occurred, not just the most serious offense as the UCR does, and relationships between each of the victims and offenders. Official sources of juvenile delinquency data also include the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Click the link to OJJDP if you are interested in learning more. This is the primary federal agency specializing in the problem of juvenile delinquency. This department provides funding to study juvenile delinquency as well. Juvenile court statistics are another source of data about delinquency. These data reports on cases of children processed through the juvenile courts. One of the biggest issues with juvenile court statistics is that many states fail to report. There are also varied definitions of offenses. Longitudinal comparison of local systems is difficult because boundary lines and population sizes change over time. Arrests have been highest in the large cities and lowest in rural areas. Urban and suburban youth are arrested for very similar crimes. Check out the links to crime rates of Cherokee County, Aiken County, and Greenville County, South Carolina. There are several limitations to official sources of data. One is that arrest statistics are just that, arrest statistics. This shows whether or not the police officer decided to detain or arrest an individual. These statistics do not show whether or not the prosecutor ever charged them with a crime. Many violent and even more property crimes go unreported. The dark figure of crime is the ominous name given for all the unreported crime that is not captured by arrest statistics. If the police don't know about the crime, choose to ignore it, or fail to make an arrest, it is not included in arrest statistics. Sometimes agencies just don't report their figures to the FBI, so the data may be missing from year to year. Lastly, there are variations of definitions and coding categories for different crimes. For example, a scenario of a schoolyard fight breaks out. One officer may arrest an individual for assault, while another may arrest an individual for disorderly conduct for the same behavior. Self-report studies. Some researchers have drawn on samples of various populations and have directly inquired through survey questionnaires about their respondents' previous delinquent behavior. This approach is designed to reveal and measure undetected and unreported instances of juvenile delinquency. Self-report studies clearly show that delinquent behavior is far more common than is indicated by official data. Self-report surveys can be expensive and time-consuming, and the absence of an ongoing national unbiased sample presents a virtually insurmountable methodological problem. Victimization studies. Another useful source of juvenile delinquency information is the victimization surveys conducted by the United States Department of Justice and a number of private researchers. These studies focus on victims and their recollections of crimes, the circumstances, and the offenders. Some of the variables included are the approximate age, sex, race, and other demographic characteristics of assailants and victims, the relationship between victim and offender, the types of crimes, and the circumstances surrounding the crime. The major limitation of the victimization data collected by the National Crime Surveys is that the victims are the only source of information. A second criticism of victimization surveys centers on the long list of serious crimes that are excluded. For example, murder, kidnapping, forgery, driving under the influence of drugs, and status offenses are seldom included in victim questionnaires. Now, do your own self-report of delinquency. Number a piece of paper from 1 to 14. I'm serious, really do it, okay? Answer yes or no to the offenses on page 50 of your textbook. How do you think our class would compare to the classes in the study? All right, we have a self-quiz. I want you to list the first 8 crime categories of the FBI UCR. Can you do it? So in the context of this chapter, what does NCVS stand for? All right, so you did that self-quiz and you did your delinquency self-report. Here are the results for my fall 2014 course. How did they do compared to your scores? Despite a 10-year decline in the number of juvenile arrests from 1998 to 2007, it is premature to declare the resolution of this serious social problem. In addition, short-term statistical reversals have occurred in the past and often turned out to be temporary anomalies before prevailing demographic, economic, and social factors returned arrest data to the more dominant and longitudinal pattern and direction. Nevertheless, the present reduction in juvenile arrests is a very positive and hopeful development that warrants national commitment to continue the trend. These trends depend on a variety of factors: percentage of teens in the population, economy and jobs, immigration, social malaise, abortion, availability of firearms, gangs, drug use, media, social justice policy, and probably a lot more. Can you think of any more factors? And that's the end of this chapter. My citations are here. All the text and the slides are quoted from the following. Thank you. Enjoy your afternoon or morning or evening.